Hi again. You just looked at two SSPs in more detail in the last tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to take a step back and look at the process by which the SSP narratives were constructed. Here they are again. It's a short, yet I would say impressive list. They are the set of visions where our society could end up, spanning a range of economic, political, and social outcomes. They result from a decades-long development process involving a wide range of experts who together have deemed them to have sufficient coverage over the space of possibilities to be able to serve in the planning of a global sustainability transition. You're probably wondering how to even go about ensuring sufficient coverage in such a complex problem, and what are convenient abstracted representations of possible futures from which these particular narratives can be seen as guiding examples, which I think was the intent of the people that developed the SSP framework. So let's address the abstracted representation question. Remember, the goal was to cover the space of possibilities that could be conceived of as realistic after specifying the shared policy assumptions. Because we are a geographically and socioeconomically diverse society, the human part of this representation has to do with how we address inequality. Let's start with these two orthogonal axes, both based on inequality. The first is a within-country inequality here that has inclusive development at one extreme and growth and poverty on the other. The second axis is an across-country inequality, where hetero to homogeneous refers to the degree to which the developing world tracks up to the developed world, as measured, for example, by the UN Sustainability Development Goals. To these two human inequality axes, we complete the space by adding a third orthogonal dimension for the health of the environment, along which different levels of environmental stress result from how efficiently we use and preserve environmental resources. We now distribute scenarios into the corners of this space. SSP2 is the middle of the road narrative in which everything is roughly the same as it is now, so we put it at the origin in this representation. SSP1 is the sustainability narrative where we achieve relatively positive results on all three axes, so we place it at this bottom front corner. SSP5 is the fossil fuel development narrative where we reduce inequality on both axes, but at the expense of heavily stressing the environment, so it goes up here. And SSP3, the regional rivalry narrative, is where we achieve relatively negative results on all three axes, so it goes at the back. All these four narratives lie in a flat sheet in this space parameterized by environmental stress versus inequality. We can identify these axes as corresponding to challenges for mitigation and adaptation respectively, and place SSP4, a road divided, as another narrative in the remaining quadrant, where high inequality slows economic growth enough to actually significantly limit our emissions. And there we have our five main scenarios. A particular integrated assessment model was chosen to be suitable for each narrative, here shown in blue. And as a final point on this slide, there's actually a tilted coordinate system for this plane in which one axis is the sum of the challenges for mitigation and adaptation. So the total challenge level relevant to our socioeconomic behavior, and then the excess mitigation challenge above adaptation, which is a climate dimension roughly mirroring the baseline amount of anthropogenic forcing. Okay, so with this abstract representation in mind, let's look at some readouts in the space over the ordered SSPs, which serves as a challenge level axis. Take energy use, for example, shown here. Not surprisingly, the SSP5, the fossil fuel developed development narrative uses more than 50% more energy than the SSP1 sustainability narrative here on the left. Note that coal is used a lot in SSP2 middle of the road and SSP3 regional rivalry, both of which assumed slowed development of the developed world that then rely more heavily on coal. A central comparison to make, of course, regards the emissions of the different narratives. That's shown here over the range of simulated forcing levels in different colors. The narratives do have an effect on the emissions profile for a given forcing, but the overall differences are more about the baseline forcing consistent with that narrative. The emissions for those baseline forcings are shown as the thick lines with white dots in each of the three. So SSP5 has the highest amount of emissions, followed by SSP3 that keeps going up by the end of the century, while SSP4 comes down and SSP2 comes down faster and SSP1 comes down the fastest. These are some possible futures. Some must be much more likely than others, but we can't know which one will take just yet. It's what we do as a society in the next 10 to 20 years that will determine the outcome. Now you'll head to the tutorial to do some of your own narrative and planning exercises. Have fun.